Women do face threats when they tell the story, and generally this tends to be because some of the stories are their truth, which is very difficult for people of other truths to sometimes identify with, and sometimes to understand and accept. And this is sort of also what we saw through the Me Too movement, for example, is as women came forward to tell their truth, the people who were maybe not aware of what they were doing or how their actions were affecting women and other people were sort of put on a little bit of a defensive, and this is where sort of the threat starts to come about. It is faced by women, but it's also faced by other groups and other minority groups as they come forward to tell their truth. And it can be very threatening for those who don't realize what the impacts of their actions are.
On Wednesday, the world marked International Women's Day to honor the economic, political, and social achievements of women around the world as they call for gender equality. As the calls for gender equality sees an uptick, are women being empowered enough to climb the political, social, and economic ladder, particularly in Africa?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's a really good question. And I think that there are many initiatives ongoing to look at women's empowerment and how we can, help women to take their space in society as equal members of society. But I think some of the recent data also shows that it will take approximately 100 years, looking at different areas of the world, to actually close that gender gap, looking at the economic, social, and political areas. So that means not my lifetime, not your lifetime, not our kids. Maybe the grandkids will be the ones that are being able to benefit from that. There are a lot of partners that are working together on this, and that's kind of the spirit of International Women's Day, is also to celebrate the progress that we have made so far, but then also to acknowledge that there are still things that we need to do and that we need to continue to invest in this area to really achieve gender equality.
Statistics show that in Africa, Rwanda is leading with nearly 62% of women holding seats in national parliament, while Nigeria, for example, which is Africa's most populous nation, has just 3.61% of women as parliamentarians, compared to 29% in the US Congress. What is contributing to this wide gap, and how can it be changed?
There's a number of factors that come into it. I think one is the political will from the government themselves, and in Rwanda particularly, there has been a conscious decision from the highest levels of government to ensure that women are represented and women are in the decision-making roles and in positions of power. So this has a key sort of driving force behind this. So there has to be a commitment from the people, from the leadership. The other is, I think, around social norms, because even when we have that, then you sort of start to hear that women don't belong in parliament, women shouldn't be in leadership, politics is too dirty a game for women, and there's these sort of mindset issues as well. And if we're looking at democracy, and if we say that we want the leadership of the democracy to really represent the people, then we also know that in most countries women make at least 50% of the population, in many countries even more than 50% of the population, and so the leadership and parliament should be respectively representative of the population. In some countries, they also have temporary special measures, and in this case, the countries will allocate a specific number of seats for women. In most countries, it's about 30%, and then in some countries, it might be more or less from there. So this is a way to sort of break those barriers down and put women in those spaces so that we can get over some of the social norms issues that we have, and the mentality of this isn't a space for women, or women shouldn't be in politics, to really show that women can do this and it's normal for women to be in those spaces.
So what can you show to be examples of how women have performed at those levels, be it political, economic, or at the social levels on the continent, which should prove that indeed women make the difference when they are at the seat?
Saw this a lot during COVID as well, and there was a lot of awareness raising around the countries and the responses of countries where women were in leadership, and the responses of countries where women were not in leadership. So there has been some documented evidence very clearly around this, but we also have, and that's sort of women in politics and political leadership. The evidence shows that when you have women, for example, in leadership in private sector, they have a much more they have a lot more emotional intelligence, and so are able to bring in the resources and the skill sets of the people in their teams to be better balanced and to have more productivity.
Let's talk about the theme for the International Women's Day, which was digital innovation and technology for gender equality. So is STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, for African girls, the window for equality within this field?
So STEM is definitely one of the areas that we do see that it would be a window for opportunity for women in this field. And in STEM is one of the areas where women are least represented in globally. So it does represent a gap that exists where the gender gap is pretty big between men and women. The STEM fields are one thing, but we also need, particularly in the context of Africa, to look at the full ecosystem of the digital space. So for women in Africa, what that means is that we need to look at first and foremost the literacy, because to get onto any digital space you need to be able to read or write, and you need to be able to read and write in one of the languages of that digital space. So it's not even the ethnic sort of languages that we have, but it needs to be, English or French or Swahili or Portuguese or one of these languages. Once they can read and write, they need to be able to access a gadget that allows them to do that. And as we all know, gadgets can be significantly expensive, especially the digital, smartphones that we're looking into, but also, computers and other things. Women are less likely to own a device and more likely to share a device with somebody else or have one in the household. Once you get over that, then you need to look at the access issues around affordability, because internet is still quite expensive in a lot of the world. So we know, for example, that in Africa, it's about 25% of women who access the internet and 35% of men who access the internet in urban areas. But when we move to the rural areas, that percentage falls down to about 15%. And then beyond that, we need to start looking at what is the role of then governments, private sector, and different partners in the space to ensure that women are able to access internet in a fair and justified manner.
What will be your message to African leaders and innovators even after the celebration is over as we move on into the year?
Women need to be the center of any development strategy and the development plans of the country, of the nation, be it economic, political, or social. And not as an afterthought or a byproduct of sort of the development strategies. So women's empowerment should be the center focus. And the reason we say this is because if we are able to ensure that women are empowered, the other populations will also be empowered as a result, because women tend to be the ones that are left out. So if we are able to address their issues, we are also able to address issues of many of the other populations in the society.